Hey guys, this is Draft Dad, and I wanted to give you a quick update on the M21 limited meta so you can stay on top of your drafts in MTGA and MTGO and keep getting those trophies and staying ahead of EV. Preserve your golden gems. So a lot has changed in the first week and a half of the format. I think a lot of people were survived by some of the overperformers and the underperformers, and so I'm going to get into that. Most core sets tend to be pretty dirtily, but this one is really focused around tempo. One of the highlight cards is Feat of Resistance, which some folks are calling the best white common over Bazri's Acolyte. I'm not quite there yet, but I do think it's a very powerful card. I ran a deck with 3 of these earlier, and my opponent really didn't stand a chance. I was just able to keep attacking them over and over, grow my creatures, increase my board control to the point where they were so far behind they couldn't come back. The other side is aggro. Like I was saying, a lot of these core formats are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You just bash your creatures into each other, and eventually someone wins. This one seems pretty synergistic and pretty low to the ground. A lot of game plans take a while to develop. 2-drops are at a premium, and so if you can get a handle on those 2-drops, and you can support them with Feat of Resistance or Hexproof, you can enchant them up, put +1/+1 counters on them, and you can win the game that way before your opponent really gets to develop their side of the board. So you really want to go first in this format. The last one is green. A lot of folks had this pegged as the worst color. I think that's starting to change now. I think people are looking at black as the worst color. One of the reasons I think is that besides Grasp of Darkness, there's really no standout commons within black, and it does have a lot of dirtles, a lot of do-nothing creatures, stuff like Caged Zombie, Gloomsower, which I do think is an overperformer, but it's still, you don't really get to cast those 7-drops unless you reanimate them, and it doesn't have a very threatening 2-drop, just a mass black card. So I think I'm going to put that as the worst color right now, and green with Drowsing Pteranodon and Pride Malkin, and of course Land War Visionary has been overperforming for me. It also allows you to ramp so you can play a 6-drop, which other colors don't really want to do. All right, so the next thing we want to chat about is the underperformers, all right? And that's going to be those dirtles, and I just talked about Colossal Dreadmaw, but it's going to be here to prove a point. If you can't ramp into a 6-drop, usually you don't want to be playing more than one of them in a deck. If you open up a huge bomb, if you open up a Massacre Worm, yes, you're going to play it, whether you can ramp into it or not. But this is not the format for a vanilla creature that's going to come down on turn 5 or 6 and not do multiple things. You're going to want to go faster. You're going to want to have your creatures bring utility, enter the battlefield effects, or affect the board state on the turn they come into play. The other thing is hard removal. A lot of it's overcosted in this set, and I'm talking about Finishing Blow here and Secure the Scene. They're both 5 mana. Usually they're trading down in this format because the 2s and 3-drop creatures are just so threatening, and you're going to be so far behind on board by the time you get to this spell, you're going to have to kill them. And then you're wasting your turn 5, killing their 3-drop, and then they're playing something, or they're double spelling on turn 5, or they're playing their 5-drop, and then you're even further behind. The other one that I think people are surprised about is Control Magic. These are usually bombs in every core format. In this one, not so much, and that's because of the aggro nature. You have to grab a tapped creature that's already attacked you, because the utility of creatures in this format as well, where things are coming into play, they're pulling a spell out of your yard, or they're giving your creatures +1/+1 counters. You're not getting those effects when you take control of their creature. So casting this on a Bazri's Acolyte doesn't really accomplish very much. You're going to take it over when it's tapped anyways, and then you don't get the effect. So I think Enthralling Hold is moving quickly down the list of first pickable cards or best cards in blue. All right, then I wanted to talk quick about the aggro decks that we're starting to see. The 2-drop slot in this set is at a premium. It seems like each color has a premier uncommon 2-drop, whether it's Seasoned Hallowblade, Jeskai Elder, Heartfire Immolator. You're going to want to pick up those 2-drops, and you're going to want to value them highly. And this is why I think green is very underrated still, but it's overperformed in this format, is because of this guy. Drowsing Pteranodon shuts down a lot of creatures in this format. It's a 3/3 for 2, and if you have a Pride Malkin or a anything to give it a +1/+1 counter, it starts attacking on its own. Even if you have a short sword that you played on turn 1, you play this on turn 2, you can equip it on turn 3, and then you're attacking for 4 damage. So I think 2-drops are going to be at a premium. Pick those highly. You're going to need them. Your 3 and 4 slot CMC slots are going to fill out on their own. The other thing is interaction. So I talked about Heartfire Immolator. This is an example of a creature that does multiple things. It's a 2/2 for 2. It has prowess, so it can grow, and it's a removal spell. You have creatures fulfilling multiple roles in your deck. So Heartfire Immolator, we knew was good coming in, but we didn't know how good and how important having creatures like this was going to be in the format. And the last one is Tempo. Folks speculated on Rousing Reed, whether it was good or not, but being able to fly your creatures, dig through your deck, it has so many synergies in the Draw 2 decks. It also has synergies in the Mill deck. If you have a Teferi's Tutelage or the Reanimator deck, it flies your creatures that are that now have +1/+1 counters on them, so they deal more damage. It goes on a Spellgorger Weird. There's just so many things that these types of cards do to generate tempo and keep you ahead of your opponent when you're going aggro, keeping your hand full of cards. All right, so I also wanted to talk about the Mythic Uncommons in each color. The first one is white. This shouldn't be a surprise. I think it's Seasoned Hallowblade. At 3/1, it is fragile, and you might have to discard a couple of cards. It's still an amazing card if it has no +1/+1 counters on it. But if you have a Basri's Solidarity or a Basri's Acolyte or any way to get this +1/+1, a dub on this is insane because it's indestructible. Your opponent will quickly have to scoop to this. If you can get it 2 +1/+1 counters on it, it's a 5/3 indestructible and you can play it on turn 2. The only ways to deal with this card are stuff like Grasp of Darkness, which is a common, and Secure the Scene for 5 mana. Either way, this card is a bomb, and it can quickly take over games and quickly increase your tempo because you're pitching lands to kill their 3-drops and their 4-drops. Here, and I'm also going to highlight some synergy cards that I think are very important to each color. So the Anointed Chorister. So obviously putting a +1/+1 counter on any lifelinker is huge. All right. This can grow itself, so late in the game it becomes a legitimate threat for 1 mana, and it also works in the Orzhov deck. So you're going to see this card show up in a lot of different places. I think it was undervalued at first, but I think this card has a lot of synergy with a lot of different decks, whether it's Boros, Selesnya, or Orzhov. Lastly, a pressure tool. I want to talk about how each color puts pressure on the opponent, and in the case of one color, it doesn't do it very well, which is why I think it's fallen on people's ranking of the colors. So Daybreak Charger is a common way to do this. You put this on your Siege Striker, which has double strike. You put it on a Flyer to give it +2/+0. All of a sudden, you're swinging for 4 or 5 or 6 on turn 3, turn 4, and it has utility late in the game to get past your opponent and keep swinging for damage. And it's also a 3/1 for 2 that's going to trade for a lot of different things. Once you start giving it +1/+1 counters, or if you use a Feat of Resistance on it, it's going to start killing and trading up as well. All right, next one is red. The Mythic Uncommon for this, we talked about it earlier, that's Heartfire Immolator. It just does so many things. It's at 2 mana. It's a 2-drop, which you really desperately need. It goes in every single red deck. It functions as a removal spell and an early drop in Gruul. In Boros, it's an aggro card. In red-blue spells, it's going to be triggering that prowess. And of course, in red-black, it's also a 2-drop that has prowess for all the black removal spells. And then it's a removal spell as well for any of those synergy cards like Liliana's Devotee, which care about creatures dying. Another synergy card is Goblin Wizardry. This goes into every red deck, with the possible exception of Gruul. It goes in the Sacrifice deck because you're creating 2 tokens that are fodder. It goes in the red-blue deck because this is a spell that creates prowess tokens. It goes in Boros because these can get aggro. If you cast a Burn Bright or a Fury of the Bitten, these things can get out of control. One Burn Bright, and you have 2 4/2s that are attacking. Another thing I wanted to chat real quick about is pressure. I ranked initially this one as unplayable, Fury of the Bitten, but putting this on your Anointed Chorister, or putting this on your Hallow Blade, or your Siege Striker, can be game over for your opponent, because you're going to have Feat of Resistance to keep those creatures protected and keep swinging, keep trading up profitably, and putting the pressure on your opponent. Black is a color I think struggles. That being said, it does have its own Mythic Uncommon. Liliana's Devotee. You can stall the board out and create some of those creatures' died synergies. This card will take over a game. In multiples, you're creating 4/2 zombies, and the key part of this card is it doesn't require a non-token creature to die. So as long as you're attacking with that 3/2 in trading, or it doesn't matter if it's a good block or not, you can just create another one at the end of the turn. So this is just a runaway freight train for your opponent. It's a nightmare to face on the other side of the field if you can't deal with it right away. Another good point, Capture Sphere, and I don't think Faith Fetters deal with this, because this is a triggered ability. Well, Capture Sphere doesn't deal with this. So it does avoid some of the removal. It avoids shock as well. Of course, it's going to die to Scorching Dragonfire, but take these early. This is a first pickable card. I think we knew it was good going in, but I didn't think we realized how busted it could be in multiples. Another synergy card here. Death Bloom Thallid, I think, is the second best black common. It's a 3/2 that's going to trade up the majority of the time, and it's going to leave a 1/1 creature behind. So this thing works in the Golgari decks. It works very well in the Rakdos decks. It stalls the board for the Orzhov decks. So you're going to be able to swing over with your flying vampires or your lifelinkers. So this has a lot of synergy. It fits in just about any green deck very well, especially your Rakdos and Golgari decks. And lastly, this is the big failing part of black, is their 2-drop slot. They just don't have a lot of great ways to pressure the opponent. Yes, Deathbloom Thallid does a good job, and yes, the Devotee does, but they're both the Devotee is very mana intensive and it requires some setup, and the Deathbloom Thallid usually doesn't stick around because of that 2 toughness, and it doesn't have a way to survive. It's a creature that's meant to die. So the only decent 2-drop, and I don't even know if this one's decent, is going to be the 2/1 Flash. I think it's overcosted on the +1/+1 ability. And so this is where black really falters. It falls behind pretty quick on the board if it can't get set up right. All right, next one I want to talk about is blue. And I think the Mythic Uncommon of the entire set is going to be Teferi's Tutelage. This completely changes the way the game is played. This deck is real. It's devastating to play against, and a lot of times there's no way to win. If you drop a turn 3 Teferi's Tutelage, the person on the other side of the table a lot of times just doesn't have a way to win at that point. These in multiples are obviously incredibly gross, and if you have 2 of these down and you cast Reign of Revelation, that's game over for your opponent. Your opponent cannot come back after that. It's milling 12 cards from their library by doing that just with that one spell, and then on your upkeep 4 more are going to go away. So this card is insane, and it's frustrating to play against, and as soon as it falls, you start checking the amount of cards in your library because you know you're going to be on a really quick clock. A synergy piece. Frantic Inventory was kind of all over the place in its ratings, but I'm steadily getting more and more on the side of this card. If you can get 3 or more, this is just a bomb, right? I remember one game I had to mull to 5, and I had 1 Frantic Inventory in my hand. My first 2 draws were 2 Frantic Inventories, so I had 3 of them. Despite being on a mull to 5, my opponent, after I cast that 3rd Frantic Inventory, said, good game. He knew it was just about over after that. So, and he was right. The game was over. So this card is incredibly powerful. It works great in the green draw 2 decks. Obviously, it works great in the spells deck. And then it just keeps you ahead of your opponent, no matter what you're doing. So I really, really like this card. Take these early. This is the Whisper Squad of the format, if you remember Ikoria. The last thing, pressure tools for blue are really low. This is one area where the color struggles. The advantage of this color is that it works so well with every other color, right? It has a lot of synergy elements just because everyone wants to draw cards. So Riddle Form is a 2-drop that can put pressure on your opponent. I have had multiples of these in a draft deck, and I've never had the chance to play a Riddle Form turn 2 and then another one on turn 3, but if you can do that, you're pretty much living the dream. A 3/3 flyer attacking on turn 3 is pretty tough to deal with. The Scry ability, I wouldn't count on being able to use it here, so it is a bit devalued because of that, but it's still a turn 2 3/3 flyer that you can cast. All right, the last one I wanted to talk about is green. The Mythic Uncommon for me was kind of hard. I don't think green really has one, so I just put in Quirion Dryad. This card is overperformed. This obviously has all those synergies with counters. Whether it's you're using the soldier that puts extra counters on it. You have the Hydra, or you have Conclave Mentor. This has huge synergies with all those cards at for the +1/+1 counters. I also want to chat about a different synergy card, Portcullis Vine. This is one that I didn't think anyone was going to play, but this works very well in the Golgari decks. It works very well in Gruul decks to hold the ground and draw you ahead of your deck, and I think it also works well in the Simic decks because you're drawing 2, and Golgari decks care about creatures dying. So there's tons of synergies with this card. It's a 1-drop. It's an 0/3 that can hold off a little bit of pressure for you. And then when you don't need it anymore, you can sack it to draw a card. Green's Pressure Tool. We've talked about this one before. Drowsing Pteranodon. Initially, I didn't think this was going to be that great, but there's so many ways that you can use this card. Giving it a +1/+1 counter with a Pride Malkin is living the dream, but it's really easy to do. So oftentimes this is going to be attacking for 4 on turn 3 and putting pressure on the opponent. All right, that's my meta update. Let me know what you guys think and what you're noticing in the format. Thank you.